might have to edit.
Welcome, everyone. Hello. This is Chat with Sandy and Karen. I'm Karen Jackson, and the co-host is
Sandy Mansell, and we're so happy to do this show again together. I wasn't here last week, just recovering. But as I say, together, well, this is Anissa's third time.
Third time's a charm.
third time, yes.
Amazing. Anissa, we can't get enough of you.
Well, that's debatable. I'm very trying. No.
Well, we are happy to have you. And I know you have many things to talk about today. So let's just start right in. First, we were going to talk about you and what your latest projects are and the future.
Yes, I know, and it's going to be hard to stop me to talk. As you know, I can talk underwater. But before I get started, I just want to say I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I'm currently on, which are Wiradjuri country in Australia. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any and all Aboriginal people paying attention to this video, podcast, whatever you're doing, whichever form you're listening to it. So Anissa Jones, Burra-Barongal Darug woman, and I am currently looking at Indigenous languages and technology. So I've gone from Indigenous pedagogy or andragogy into the language space. I'm doing a Masters of Indigenous Languages Education at the University of Sydney, and that was a bit of a mouthful. And I'm also delivering digital storytelling with Aboriginal communities. So the first and foremost is the Aunts Out at Brungle mission, which is in Tumut in New South Wales in Australia, and what we did with them, and then moving into some AR, VR, which will be I love within digital, and one day I'll have something with them as well. But and then moving into the future of education, and what it looks like and how we can merge those two together to really update the skill sets, but also keep a better record or accurate records of language, stories, and songlines in particular. Because some of our documents are just 200 and something years old, and I can't read cursive writing from England in the 1700s. I can't do it. So being able to hear it and how it's pronounced is so much better, particularly as it is an oral language, oral culture. But yeah, so there's a lot to talk about in this space, and I better stop talking and then get to the questions, or I'll be here forever, and so will you. So.
Okay, let's talk about. I really am so excited about this prototype, the Indigenous in digital HoloLens prototype. So I'm going to go ahead and show that. Okay.
Yes, it's so good.
Okay, all right. And just you kind of set it up a little bit, but this is. Go ahead. If you want to say something.
Yeah, so this is by a company called Indigital, and it's run by Darug Cabriga woman, Michaela Jade. It's got a bit of doof music. So if you're Australian, you'll know exactly what I mean.
I muted the music, if that's okay.
Better. So, this is great. So this is Michaela demonstrating the augmented or virtual reality, augmented and virtual reality. So she's got a HoloLens on at the moment, and this is what, from Michaela's point of view. So Indigital actually create with students or with businesses or whoever, basically augmented reality or virtual reality using 3D paint is a good example, what they start with the kids in schools, and to keep, traditional stories going. And, so I'll just let everyone have a look, because this is very cute. It's one of our spirits. Not my spirit, but a spirit. And as you can see, she's just, it sounds better with the doof music. But the music's too loud. No, it's all good. The music's too loud. But as you can see here, Sandy, in particular, because I know this, do you see what I mean? There's a dilly bag that's hanging from their chest. So a dilly bag is, it's just like a little pouch, or you could call it a handbag, to put it into modern terms. So that's what they actually do. I know, I love it. And she is so funny. And it's just a beautiful way of maintaining our connections to our culture. So as you can see here, she's manipulating the screen. I just love it. I can't wear those because I wear glasses, so I can put my proper lenses into the HoloLens and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But as you can see, these are different creatures that they've created, and the Aboriginal names. Now I say Aboriginal names because I can't remember what the language is, but that's for the group that they've come from. That's the names for their for the images. So you've got the little, what we call a millipede or a centipede.
Yeah.
And so there's some amazing things that you can do with the technology. And here's the drawing tools and what they do. So, I think that's, I can't see properly. I think it's Blender. I could be wrong. But this is the course that they run when they do go into schools, and they do quite a lot. They're actually in Blacktown in Sydney last week, delivering to schools in Sydney. So there's Michaela with her HoloLens, bless her. And she's an amazing woman. And this company started from scratch. She's built up to it. They've gone to the World's Fair at Dubai last year. They designed a message stick that had a QR code, basically technology embedded in it. So when you scanned it with your phone, it popped up with two aunties in a humpy, or a like a wooden house, a dirt house that was, like that. And they were speaking in language. So it was minimal conversation backwards and forwards, but it was prompted by certain questions as to what responses you would get. So where is the river, or how do I, those sorts of things. And so that's what they're doing. And they're actually incorporating, depending on which country they're on, Aboriginal country, that the language. So the elders have a lot of discussion with it, and that's one thing that I am desperately wanting to do in digital storytelling. But that's just an example of what people can do, and I've just think it's amazing. And I know, Sandy, you're just like, oh my god, I want to do that too. I want to do it every time I see it. Anything with them, I want to keep doing it. But the fact that they were at Dubai World's Fair, really showcases a lot. And Michaela's done a few things in Sydney as well with a couple of the tech conferences that have gone on. Obviously, since COVID, they're all trying to come back now. But so it's really nice to see. And the group's all over Australia, and they've actually done some stuff with First Nations Canadians as well during the COVID lockdown. So it was remote, completely remote, and they were able to do that successfully as well. So that's something that I would love to get into in terms of my own language and the revitalisation of it. And I think that's a great way for the kids, the younger ones, because we know kids are sponges, and we know that they will pick it up a lot quicker, whether it's language or it's the coding that's behind it, because coding is a language in itself, as we know. So I think it's a great thing. And so shout out to Michaela and Cassandra for putting up with me and all my 50 billion questions about it. And I just think it's a great little one, it's Aboriginal owned, but two, it's offering some really great training and supports for revitalisation of culture and just retaining of culture. So there might be something that other people want to touch base with them for, or whatever, but I sort of had to showcase that one because, I'm my version that I did with the aunties at Brungle is slightly different, but that's because of we don't have any real internet down there. No internet access. It's very limited. So there's that way, and then there's also another way that you can do it when you do have limited access to technology. And so are there any questions about that one first? Because I could talk forever, as you know.
I was like, as you were talking, I had a million questions popping up, but I think you've been answering as you were just telling us all this information. It's so amazing what's happening out in the world. And I think both Karen and I are like so amazed at how far technology has just advanced. So when we started our podcast 2 years ago, we were just keeping up with traditional, what's happening in the traditional way of teaching and learning, and how we adapt to these new ways of doing it. But now everywhere it's about AR, VR. It's, I've got my my VR headset as well.
Yeah.
It's just a new way of looking at things and engaging, and that's what we're looking for, engagement of education now.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is so for a lot of Australian schools, there's grants and funding applications for in digital to go out to the school. They help you write the grants and everything to support, because they see the validity behind it all. And I see the validity behind it all. Every time I present on anything First Nations, I always talk about them, because it's a great program, but it's that dual way of learning, in the sense that they're learning the coding and the technology skills, but then for some of them it could be they're learning the cultural connections and skill sets and language attached. So it's a really great blending of the two, which we don't always see in a lot of tech when it's targeted towards First Nations people, if it's not run by First Nations people. So I think I love it. It's for me, it's a really great opportunity, and I really just want to dig deep down and do a lot more in that space. So maybe when I finish the Masters, I don't know, or the PhD, whichever one comes first, I don't know.
Yeah, I can see why Karen's done her PhD, because once you start studying, you just can't stop.
You can't. It leads to another question, which leads to another question, which leads to another question. Yeah.
Well, that's it.
Absolutely.
Mine will probably be about languages ed, but I actually am thinking, well, will technology then support the learning and retention of, and even just, it's not even, I don't want to use it, it's not gatekeeping, it's retention of information for communities, because we've got a whole pile of stuff like books. We're now asking for things to be scanned, so we've got digital copies, because we know that paper doesn't always last forever. Right. So how do we fix that? How do we solve that? And a classic example is, there's a book from my community that we went to the university to have a look at when I was there in the April holidays, and it's got legs and walked out of the library. And that's a book that is no longer in print. So copyright doesn't apply when it's no longer in print, and we've tried to find copies and everything. So scanning electronic copies of resources helps, but when you're creating newer ones, you're also creating great connections and memories for students. And I find that when kids in schools are connected to their culture, they're more likely to, one, do better, and two, actually want to be there. And I think that's the really hard thing, is how do we keep kids engaged in schools? We've had COVID. We had pre-COVID, there were kids who still didn't want to stay in school. So how do we entice them to doing something that they may actually find quite interesting, and it may be that spark that has them going down this way instead of this way. And having taught in the jails, couple of jails in Australia, that's the feedback that the guy, when I spoke to them, they've said we left school because we didn't feel that we were recognised as people, or they felt it was very racist, or they just felt that they were being treated like idiots. And no one likes to feel bad, ever. No one likes to be made to feel bad. So if we can stop that and build their skills up. I mean, if I had a kid coming to me who was 18 who's designed a video like that, like a full video, I'd be like, I would be looking at their year 12 results. I'd be looking at, oh my God, this kid's done an amazing job. What can they do for us, and hire them, as opposed to saying, oh, well, they bombed out in English in, former English teacher, but I was picking English. But you know what I mean? Like, there's a different skill set engaged, and we need to encourage that, as opposed to, rely on numbers. Yeah. Numbers.
if that's so much more authentic than saying, well, I got an A, I got 100% on my test. Right. But can you translate that into something we can use in our company or something that you can provide for your family? Can you translate something like that?
And that's life skills. That's a life skill, and when you think about if you're ever creating anything electronic or with technology, you've got to have a deadline. You've got to have a storyboard, possibly. You've got to identify things. You've got to problem solve. You've got to be innovative in your thinking. So all of these are 21st century skills that they may not get from an 18th century teaching situation. I say situation because, that talking to students is still happening in schools in the world. And, whereas doing it this way, and ironically, that's how we learn as Aboriginal people is we look, we do it with people, and then we do it on our own. And so that's really encompassing that pedagogy as well as giving the kids the tools that they need. So I think it's fabulous, and I just love that.
Talking about 18th century, Anissa, I was talking to my my mentor. I'm doing another course, and I was talking to my mentor for that course. He's in Bavaria in Germany, and he said his students, his kids who are in primary school are still sitting in rows. The teacher still writes a chalk on the board, and has a projector with the acetate transparencies.
Wow.
Technology doesn't exist, and every school in Bavaria are doing the same thing at the same time. There is no change or individuality or anything. This is it. This is what you do.
Wow.
It's like that, in Pink Floyd's The Wall. That's all I'm going to say. The scene I'm talking about when the kids are going through the sausage mixer. That's I know I make lots of references to various movies and songs, but that to me is really a disadvantage to the kids. And I have seen a projector with acetate in the last decade, but it was at a school where my son's then teacher brought it up, and he was PE teacher. So he brought it up in a staff meeting, and the laughter that was coming from every single teacher in that room, I still remember it. He drew little pictures to represent the kids' faces. Everyone else did a slideshow because he was a year coordinator. He had the acetate and did that. And I'm like, we all said, where the hell did you find that thing? Because, this is so archaic to us, and we've all got whiteboards, and then you see a chalkboard and people go, what do I do with this? And now you can buy chalkboard paint. I'm going, what's the point? We had to... It's, we've got to move with the times, but are we really disadvantaging those kids in a sense of exploring and that learning through play or learning through exploration type stuff, which is why, things like in digital actually do work for those kids who are disengaged, because it gives them a bit of ownership over their own learning as opposed to being dictated to. And I think that happens all over the world though with... and I hate having tables in a line. I actually deliberately put them in groups or circles or horseshoe shapes or anything that breaks it up from that straight. I still remember the wooden tables and chairs in Australia, and they had the metal arms and legs. And in an Australian summer, that's just as bad as the seatbelt clicker when you had the hot it's like a rite of passage. And we even had slides like slippery dips that had but made out of metal, and you just put the hose down them with water to get them cooler, because that's old school. Let's make it more interesting and engaging for our kids. I know I go back to the 80s all the time, sadly.
That's true, though. It's so true.
Aaron, at least she's not going beyond that.
Really. I can barely remember the 80s, just barely.
I was in school.
Me too.
Hey, I've got 2 grandchildren now, Sandy. I've now got 2.
No. She beat
Yes. She was born in March. She was born 2 days before her big brother's 5th birthday. So I now have 2 off thingo. I'll show you the picture because I'm very cyber conscious. But yes, very. So that's who I look at when I think about educational practice. What do I want my grandson in particular, because he's in kindergarten? What do I want for him to succeed, and what does he need? He loves technology. Don't know where he gets it from, but he loves technology.
Okay.
And yeah.
I wanna pause. Okay. But at the risk of sounding like I don't want us to sound like we're trashing everything that's old school, because you shared a picture with us, and I'm going to share this. It's you set it up while I'm getting. So what is this picture that we're going to see?
So actually, I better pull it up on my screen too, so I know what I'm talking about, because that's always a good thing. So as I said earlier about, in digital is one way of doing it, but if you don't have, say, the internet access or the technology, you're thinking of things like that, there's another way to do it. So this is the aunts at Brungle. Now, I always say the aunts at Brungle. So we've got Annie Sonny on the left and Annie Phyllis on the right. And right in the middle is their friend Vina. Now, Vina's not Aboriginal. Annie Sonny and Annie Phyllis are Wiradjuri women. And they created for an art exhibition this, what do we call it? It's not even a tapestry, but it's just I call it artwork. So this tells a visual representation of the history of Brungle. So what we did was they were working on this, and I said, you know what, you wanted to do storytelling, tell your story, all that sort of stuff. Let's make a video about this. So we had photos of it during the process. We then went outside. This is where this photo was taken. And we did the recording of them outside, explaining, in each of them taking a turn at explaining certain things. And I was holding it up at the back with another staff member who was like half my size. So it was sort of like this. And we still laugh about it because we had our arms up in the air for about 45 minutes. I'm not joking. And then we, so we had some close-ups. We had photos of the whole process that either I had taken or other people had taken who were working with the aunts on this. And then we did the video, and then we did a little bit more. So, the aunts were telling me the story of the whole, like when they were telling me the story, they were deliberately pointing to certain things on this. Call it a map. Let's just call it, it's a map. That's and it's good. It's a historical document. There we go. And so they were talking about the river, which is down in the bottom right-hand corner, and telling me about how things used to be there. So you used to be able to go in the river and pick out mussels that were huge, and I mean massive, massive, massive. And then with, erosion, with farms being around there and everything, it really changed certain things in the landscape. So you've got that ecological damage. So the mussels are really there's a word for it. It's called gudjuk, really bad. And so, that reminds them of some amazing times when they were younger and they could go and do that. They've got the guga, which is the lizard above that, and the dinawan, which is the emu. So that's Wiradjuri terminology. We've got the gunya, which is the house in near the fire, which is that big orange circle in there. We've even got 2 old men talking business near the river. So that's exactly how Annie Phyllis tells me that. That's 2 old men talking business, I love her. We've got the scar tree up the top right-hand corner. So we would use scar trees as like directionals, and also they were representative of when we would cut out coolamons or little but like just one big piece of wood that would be like a basket. You could put babies in it, or you could gather food or water or anything like that in it. Then we keep going across. We've got mullion, which is the eagle that's flying right over the top. We've got bogong moths. Now, bogong moths are massive. I hate moths. My head almost, that's how big they are. And what they do is they would cook them and in a fire, and they'd shrink down to about yay big, and it was a great source of protein for Aboriginal people back then. Nowadays they get sprayed when, you know, we spray all the crops. They get caught up in that, and so you can't eat them anymore. They look really gross. I hate moths, but they're gross. They look gross, and when they're squished, they look even more gross. So then they've got the cemetery for Brungle Mission, and then they've got the schoolhouse, which is that like cream house in the middle, down the bottom, sorry. And it's got a little bell made out of a gumnut shell as a school bell and that sort of thing. They've got a witchetty grub in a basket in the centre. And then they said, oh, Anissa, can you do some? I don't sew. I'm just telling you now, I don't sew. They got me to sew. So I sewed that tree next to the schoolhouse for them. And so that was an honour because this was about their history, and I'm not from that country. And so they did all of this. All of this is natural fibres. They dyed everything as well. But that was their art side coming out. And then when we did the digital side of things, they planned out the storyboard, what they were going to talk about in the video, what photos we should use, how it was going to be presented. The acknowledgement in language, the welcome in language was done by one of their nieces who speaks more fluent Wiradjuri than they do. So there was that recording of language. Then we used, what's the iPhone or the iPad app, I can't remember, Movie Maker, and we used the Movie Maker to then create the video. And so they got to approve everything that went in that storytelling, like completely 100% ownership, because it's their story and it's no one else's. And it was just such a nice thing. So now our next project is they're actually creating a book. They're using Snapfish, so those online books that you come together. So they're creating the pages using, taking photos of it, editing it all, and then putting it into a book. If I was doing stuff with them with, say, virtual reality, then we'd go up to the local primary school, which is very tiny. There's like 10 students, and work with the kids. And that's where you're engaging the new generation with the old. And in the back of the book, there's actually a reference to that in there. So they're starting to learn all of these new skills, but keeping it real. And, that's another way of doing it. That's low tech to an extent. Considering you look at virtual reality, this is low tech, when you compare it to virtual reality. But yeah, I just think it's a great opportunity for storytelling and sharing. And, the aunts absolutely love it. And so, yeah, watch this space. I'll probably have a book, and I might take a shot of the cover and put it up on social media when it's done. It's not done yet. It won't be done till June. But, they've done a lot of work in this, and they've actually now gone into the historical stuff that they have, like photos, first-hand accounts, everything, and they are telling more of a story than they ever have to anyone before. So it's actually a great thing for the community because it's something that hasn't been documented before. So that's another great reason to keep this going.
Right. The even though the art itself is not technology, the technology is being used to promote it and to tell the story. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I could even use, if I really wanted to schmick it up a little bit, is take elements of the video and put QR codes with around, certain elements of it. I would use an image of this map. I would not use the map itself. I would do images to explain from the aunt's video what each section is. So that's something that I would have to do because they're not as comfortable. You say QR code, they know that from like when you check in for COVID, but they all had a card because they didn't have that the phone and the app to do it. So it's supporting them in their learning of new technology in a way that they're comfortable with. But I've in the past done it with kids where they record what they're doing and we make QR codes out of it, and there's that explanation for the parents. So they learn how to do that and set it up. You've got 30 seconds to talk about a subject and all of that story planning and everything else. So that's the very low tech, and then you've got the high tech up there. There's a nice little middle, but yeah, it's nice to see how you can do that in two different ways that doesn't take away from the underpinning of culture, and that's the important thing.
Absolutely. I put the link to the new primary school the Brungle Public School. Is that
Brungle Primary? Yeah, they're so cute. They are cute.
That is really sweet pictures. At least I only had a chance to look at the pictures, but great story. A great story behind it.
They're a group. That little school is very, very little, but the kids there are absolutely gorgeous. And there's a Dreamtime room that's been made available, so the aunts will go there and have discussions with the kids and do stories and culture and everything else. So there's a really tight community there, which is nice to see. So that might feature in the next book. They want to do a whole pile of books now.
Oh, good.
So I'm going to be busy with them. Watch out.
That's excellent. I love that. All right. Next, My Story, My Voice, the Gen S website.
Oh, yes. So that you've got the AR/VR, and you've got the Brungle, and then in the middle is, I'll put these out of order, but the middle is a non-Aboriginal company working with community members in Canberra. So this is how they were creating their stories. This involved editing, teaching the students who are in the videos how to edit their videos, the music, how to embed the music into it, the photos. So the one that I've shared, and I think Sandy's just shared that, is if you look for the one, learning and sharing my culture with Ronnie Jordan, that's my friend, and she hates it every time I reference it, but it's so good. And her son plays the didgeridoo in the background. So he's now, bless him, he's nearly 18 and now, but he was like in late primary school when he did this. So, it's a nice way of encouraging the cultural connections, but also upskilling. Now, if you ask Ronnie, does she know how to do that anymore? She'd probably go, I've got no idea. But both her sons now are working for the ANU, so the Australian National Uni, in IT. So, that's what they got out of it as the boys, whereas she got to tell her story. And so it was that ownership of stories from the community, by the community. And so Gen S is the business that actually gave them the skill sets. And they do interviewing. They had a professional photo shoot. They got to, select photos, or do ideas, whatever they wanted to. If you can find it, I think that'd be awesome. That's that first one. And Ronnie does a whole pile of things, but that one's amazing. And there's also a few from other students about art, or about their identity as an Aboriginal person, or even just the work they do in the community. So there's a variety of stories. There's actually two. There's My Story, My Voice, and Presenting Elders. And it just is a way of recording people. Now, when some people pass away, they'll have to change those videos, obviously, to give a warning. It's just culturally appropriate. But at the moment, no one has passed. So if any Aboriginal people look at it, it's okay. You don't need the warning. Everyone's still alive and kicking. But it's a really good way of creating a documentary with people who've never created a documentary before. It's about themselves, which is always the hardest thing to talk about, and then giving them the tools to creating such amazing videos. And while they're only 3 minutes-ish long, they do tell a wealth of information about the people that are in them. So that's another way you can do it. So they use, I want to say, what is it? I can't even tell you what the program is now. Adobe, one of their programs, but it's a really, that's it. Premiere. And, so this is a really good program as well. So this program at the moment isn't running, but this is the middle ground. So you've got people that have no real IT skills, but are getting supported to then create the final product. And then this is the showcase as well. So, if you ever want to have a look at those, have a look. It's a really great program, and the confidence of the students that, and I say students because a lot of them were students at the centre I was working at, really, it gave them a voice. And for some of them, it was the best thing they'd ever done. Like they went, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then when they finished it, that sense of achievement was huge. So it's always nice to see, but there's a couple in there that are just absolutely amazing that tell some really good stories. So that's another one in terms of what would you like to do to talk about your culture, and that can be any culture. It doesn't just have to be Aboriginal culture. All of these can work for wherever you are in Australia or wherever you are in the world. It's just really so there's 3 options. There might be even more options if you go for a spectrum. I have no idea, but these are the 3 that I've experienced or really enjoyed participating in.
Yes.
So yeah, so there's some good ones.
That's lovely. So, and then have you tried any podcasts? So that would be just voice, but no visual. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So there's talk with the elders back home in Sydney to actually do that. So create a video and a podcast at the same time. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
To raise awareness of Darug stories and culture. And there are a lot of Aboriginal podcasts that are all out there. Some of them talk about language or our stories, or there's media versions, or there's specific people that are talking, with famous Aboriginal people or local Aboriginal people, depending on where they're from. So for us, we're looking at creating that, but also with a bit of the Google Earth and the geography. You remember the what is it? The Google Street View, with the pack. Go out and go on country. So this is something that I've spoken to the elders about. So I think they're gonna want to do that sooner rather than later, is go out on country and identify sites of interest for us, and then put it on the Google Maps and use the Street View. Obviously, there'd be some elements that you can't share. So women, we can look at women's stuff, but men can't look at it, and so on. So it'd be a generic one, but then they may record a secondary one for community-only use. There's a great example of something like that with Uluru, and it was where the elders were talking when you do the Google Cardboard, and the elders are talking, you're looking at Uluru, but you can hear the singing and the talking about the place, and they're singing in language. So I'd like to do something like that. And then one other thing is creating the VR QR codes for those sites and telling the story about them. And I've actually said maybe get a digital involved, because that was why Michaela started what she did, because she was working in Arnhem Land and at Kakadu, and wanted to create something for the tourists to have a look at, scan, and then, find out further information. So this is a lot of new technology, but delivering old ways, but it's still keeping those stories alive. And so I would love to see a lot more of that. And so in the next 6 months, I think we'll be giving that a bit of a hard go to work with Google to get that done. So when I go there, and I'm going in August for my language course, I'll be be talking to them about it, because we really want to overlay some maps. We want to do a whole pile of that stuff for our own historical reasons, but also for cultural reasons, and just to identify where things are, because with invasion, a lot of things got muddled up and changed, and so it's just bringing all those important things back into the community. So there's a lot going on in this space. So wait and see. So Sydney may look a little bit different when you click on a QR code, maybe when you come and visit.
Yes, that is so fabulous. I love that. Do you want to show we showed the initial video, how it was started, but do you want to, shall we show the 3-minute, the actual video that Michaela?
Yeah, if you want to. So this is just the explanation for Questacon. So Questacon is our science place. Oh, Sandy, you would love it. It's like 5 floors of science and nerdy stuff. And they even have like a Tinker Lab. I love it. But they've worked with Michaela in this space as well. So if you ever come to Canberra, Questacon is the place to go if you're a nerdy science person. It's just beautiful.
Okay.
It is in digital. In Digital is Indigenous and Digital, and we create mobile phone apps that use augmented reality for Indigenous cultural storytelling. So we started with cultural storytelling on bark and ochre paintings, and what we actually do with the app is you hold your phone up to the artwork and the artwork comes alive in three-dimensional storytelling. We use animation, and the traditional owners who paint the artwork are very involved in how the artwork comes to life in 3D animation. It started because I'm a Cabrogal woman, so my country is actually not in Kakadu, it's in Sydney. I was standing at a cultural place of significance to our people, and I didn't understand what the cultural site was about. And I really wanted a way to communicate what all these amazing cultural knowledge systems are about. And at the same time, I was at the University of Canberra, and I saw augmented reality for the first time in 2012. And I went home and had a shower, and then in the shower, this idea came into my head that we should try and combine augmented reality storytelling with Indigenous cultural knowledge systems. So augmented reality was very new in 2012, and it's still quite new to people. And explaining what my idea was really, really difficult. I was just making an assumption that everyone had seen augmented reality and they knew what I was talking about. And I actually realised that I had a problem in the way I was communicating my big idea, because I did the mum and dad test, and my mum and dad just didn't really understand what I was doing. So I realised then that I needed to refine the way that I told people, investors, people who might want to get on board with the idea about what it is that I'm trying to achieve.
And who is In Digital sort of aimed at?
It's aimed at Indigenous communities, primarily in Australia, but could be applied across the world. So Indigenous peoples like myself, we have a lot of trouble engaging young people these days in cultural knowledge translation. And one thing that we found through talking to 300 elders from across the world was that traditional owners are proud custodians of humanity's spoken history, but they're most afraid of being the last ones with these knowledge systems, and they're finding it difficult to engage with young people. And I asked them why, because I'm an Indigenous person, I want to know my cultural heritage. And they said because the young people always have their heads in these devices and they can't compete with the phones and the iPads and digital technologies. So one of the things that we wanted to do was combine digital technologies and cultural heritage knowledge systems in the phone where the kids are. So we started with these cards in Kakadu, working with 5 senior traditional artists to tell stories from bark ochre paintings, which are very traditional. So they're like the artwork you've seen at the cave here. They were painted on bark and we brought them to life in 3D augmented reality. And now that the community is very comfortable with what the technology is, they're happy to move to sites like this. So the next phase of In Digital storytelling is making the app available to tourists that might come to our cultural places. So they can hold their phone up to a site like this and the artwork will come to life for them in their language so they understand what they're looking at. And the reason that that's really important to traditional owners here is that it gives them an economic development opportunity. And traditional owners, they've been explaining to me that they're not always available to be on country. So it's a really great way for them to be able to share their stories in the way that they want to be told, and also be able to earn an income from their cultural knowledge.
Wow, so powerful. 2012.
Yeah, I know, right? Like a decade ago. So I've just shared in the chat the actual app itself on Apple. So there's a couple of little screenshots in there if anyone wants to have a look at it. And I've done a really intro to teaching of it, and we created an echidna. Like we scanned the echidna and it up popped, and it was so cool. I took a photo ages ago, but when you do that, got to scroll through 4,000 photos, but it was such a good experience. And as you can see, like those sites, a lot of those sites, particularly in WA and Queensland, are still really, and the Northern Territory, are really still around today. We do have sites back home in Sydney, but anyone can walk up to them, like anyone. So we have rock carvings like that you can walk over, which you shouldn't, but you know what I mean? So
get close to it,
those sorts of things would be nice. Yeah, it'd be nice to preserve them. And we've got some books that actually do talk about those sites. So so that's one way that I would be looking at trying to recreate some little bits and pieces. And I think that's so important. That's what it would be then with the Google Earth, because if you create that, then you can go there and then you can do this. Yeah. And that's the important part of it all. And as she said rightfully, the elders can't always come out to do explanations. So if we can get them doing it once, then that can be used. And if they do pass, then obviously we have to get permissions from the community to keep using that information, because consent's no longer given when the elder passes. So, yeah, and a lot of people don't realise that, like even the artworks, people will see them in a book and they'll take them and the next minute they're a carpet or they're on someone's, wallpaper. And sometimes that art's only in there by agreeance with the elders. And so when you put it on something else, you're actually, in one case, the carpet, you were walking over a sacred story. We don't walk on churches and we don't, step on the Bible or anything like that. So that's putting it in a cultural aspect, but for people to understand, that's how important these things can be. So our Indigenous cultural intellectual property is always first and foremost when doing these sorts of things. And so if anyone ever works with Aboriginal people, consent is not always a given. So make sure you ask.
That is so good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I think that goes for every Indigenous group across the world. But the app is there and it's designed for the iPad, and your phone. If people are wanting to have a look at it, check it out. I just think it's that little video was so great, and I think it really got across how we can incorporate culture and technology and have that cohesive balance that's respectful but also upskilling people.
Oh, that's a perfect place to leave it, I think, is the balance.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
See?
Yeah.
That's all right. Sandy, what did you get out of it? Because I know you love that sort of stuff.
No, there's so much. I think we need to invite you back. Just talk about VR and AR, because I have
bring some
many
toys.
things I would like to share with you on that one.
Yep.
That would be so cool.
Actually, a demo.
I would love to. Yeah, and I would love to, one of the other things that I do for storytelling is a walk on country, and students create their own YouTube videos of being on country as well. And ironically, Michaela's sister Cass is in my class who did one, and but off country, she was in Victoria, and the students create those videos all by themselves, and that's another way of maintaining connection to country and connection to culture. So there's a bit out there. If people don't know, they need to just dig a little bit, and don't be afraid to ask. But tech is there to support culture as far as I'm concerned. I may not speak for everybody, but what I've seen of it, it is a really great, worthwhile tool to use to keep those stories alive.
Awesome. Okay, I'm putting up your social media information. If anyone would like to follow you or look or get some resources or contact or questions or connections, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, happy to anyone to reach out.
Yeah, amazing work, Anissa. Always good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's so good. You watch this space, Sandy. You never know. If they ever go over that way again, I'll let them know that you're there and you want to meet them.
Thank you. I'll be there.
Yep, absolutely.
Me too.
All right, Sandy, you want to bring us home?
Yes. So another inspiring and educational future talk about how we're using digital in education with Anissa. And I think, as I said during the podcast, is that we will continue with this because I personally believe AR and VR is the way forward, but we can bring Karen's opinions in and Anissa's opinions. It's a great topic, especially with the next generation, like what they are going to be learning. So thank you to all our listeners once again listening to us. Both myself and Karen are ready, to have more visitors, talking about topics that inspire you, motivate and engage you or learners, or maybe it doesn't inspire you anymore. in education. Bring it on. We're here to chat with a coffee, anything and everything. So don't forget to follow us on social media. We are there, and see you next time.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Anissa. Bye-bye.
Bye.